We moved to Alameda to start ministry at the Naval Air Station before it shut down. We lived on High Street, right off High Street. And right across the street, there was this old man I'd see shuffle out of his house. And I told my wife, I said, listen, he's going to die pretty soon. I need to get near this guy and try to share the gospel with him, try to see where he's at. So he goes out one day, and I go next to him. And he was one of these, he was fearful, really. He said, what do you want? Get away from me. He said, no, I'm your neighbor. I just want to get to know you. And I didn't back away. I mean, I backed away, gave him space, but I walked with him all the way down and walked back. And probably 3 or 4 mornings a week, it was like clockwork. I knew he was going to come out about 10 o'clock, and I'd be looking for Bill to come out, and I'd go meet with him. So one day, and I earned his trust. He started telling me about his life. He showed me his garage. He had like 20 different model train engines in there that were made of brass that all operate, and they all were worth about $10,000 each. He showed me his treasures. You know, it was amazing. Then one day Bill didn't show up. He lived with his sister. He was about 88 years old. His sister was like 90. And I went over and saw his sister, and he fell. He broke his hip. Well, where's he at? He's in a nursing home. You think I could go visit him? I think he'd like that. So I took a gospel tract with me. I thought it's quick. I got to share the gospel with this guy. He's not going to last long. So I got to him, and I asked him if he could share, and I saw him, and his eyes were bloodshot. He was in pain. He had old man growth, about 4 days worth. He just looked like a mess. And he was fearful. He was suspicious. He said, that guy over there is trying to steal my stuff. This guy wants me. It was a mess. I said, Bill, can I share with you some good news? And he goes, yeah. And so I share the gospel. And I get to the point where if you pray and ask Jesus into your heart, he'll forgive you. And he just started weeping. He said, he'll never forgive me. He won't forgive me. And he just wept. He sobbed. And I'm doing the math. He's 88 years old, and this was back in mid-80s. And I'm sitting there thinking, maybe he's a Nazi death camp guard. Maybe he had killed millions of Holocaust. I'm trying to figure out what he had done that was so horribly horrible, and then I'm trying to figure out the appropriateness of trying to draw it out of him. And finally I said, Bill, please, what did you do that Jesus could never forgive? And he wept more, and I was just quiet, waiting for him. And finally he said, when I was a young man, I abused myself. And that was old person talk to say that he had masturbated. And he went on to say that he had masturbated maybe 4 or 5 times in his life. And on the inside of me, I'm sitting there thinking, is that all you got? Come on, Bill, is that it? Come on, Bill. And I didn't say that. I'm sitting there thinking it. And I thought, that's Satan. It could be, in my mind, and I'm not trying to minimize this, but he could take, there was no fornication, there was no adultery, there was none of this stuff. It was self-abuse. And he said, that's why I never got married. Because he said, if I couldn't control myself in this, how could, and so I'm sitting there thinking about Satan, you evil, curse word, that you would take this old man and keep him locked in chains of guilt and shame, deprive him the pleasures and joys of marriage because of a few youthful indiscretions. Yet that is our enemy. He hates us. And we have to learn how to fight him. So he's an accuser. He's a slanderer. He's a destroyer. And he has timing. In 1 Peter 5:8, it says he prowls around like a roaring lion. In Luke 4:13, after Jesus said, "Begone, Satan," it said Satan left until a more opportune time. And so he picks us at the time when we're the weakest, when we're the most vulnerable. And then I've come up with this acrostic. I've studied enough of my sin patterns. I've come up with this acrostic. I sin when I'm stressed out. I sin when I'm tired. It forms the acrostic stabs. I sin when I'm alone. So stressed, tired, alone. I sin when I'm bored. I have too much time on my hands. The expression, idleness is the devil's workshop. I don't have a problem with drinking, but a lot of guys have said, listen, when I get booze, my inhibitions go down, or if I get high. So when you're bombed, you're vulnerable. Or you're vulnerable after a spiritual high. It was after Elijah called down fire on the Mount Carmel that within 48 hours he's saying, God, kill me. Jezebel had put a death warrant out on his life, and he's whining and complaining and thinking he's the only guy. And it was after he called down fire from heaven, for goodness sakes, one of the most powerful prophets that existed in the history of the world. And he had lost perspective after a spiritual high. And so we have to teach spiritual principles. We have to teach the doctrine of Satan. You have to teach how to recognize and overcome the evil one for your own growth. But the main thing is you have to learn how to resist the evil one in order to fight and win this battle of purity. There are demonic forces. I even coming up here, the last 3 or 4 days, I've been under attack. I've had all kinds of spirits of accusation and condemnation on me, telling me, you shouldn't speak. You're not qualified to speak. Telling me and reminding me of all the different times and places I've sinned in this area. And recognizing this is just nothing more than the evil one, trying to rob joy, trying to, just to hurt me, because he hates me. He hates you. He wants to destroy you. And so we have to stop the spiritual identity theft. Identity theft is a big deal. You hear LifeLock, all these different things, but Satan is a master identity thief. He tries to rob you of who you really are. If you sin once, if you have a same-sex attraction, he will use the world and the world system to say, see, you're a homosexual. And now this is your identity. This is how you must live the rest of your life. You have to join everything aspect of this thing. If you like to wear women's underwear or like to dress as a man, they'll say, see, you're a transsexual. And this is how you need to live life. There's nothing that's more devastating than for someone to be so deceived to think that their sin defines the essence of who they are. And this is the essence of who Satan is, what he does. He tries to steal our identity. See, in Ephesians 5, it says, once you were darkness. We were all darkness. Once you were darkness. It says, but now your identity has changed. Now you are light in the world. So walk as children of the light. And so part of the great challenge that we have of being a follower of Jesus is to fight identity theft. The essence of who are you really? 1 John 3:1, you're God's children now. We have heritage. We have an inheritance. We have all these things going for us. And then another principle is Kenny Rogers, the great modern day theologian. You got to know when to hold them. Know when to fold them. I started too high. Know when to walk away and know when to run. And this was modeled for us by the great Saint Joseph. You know, you got to... in Genesis 39, Potiphar's wife came to him, and day after day she said, lie with me. And Joseph's one of the only guys in scriptures that says he was handsome in face and form. In other words, he could have been on the cover of GQ. You know, he could have been on the, I won't say that, but he had a good body and he had a good face. And it was noticeable. And employer abuse, his boss's wife, who had power, position, and authority, was asking and then even demanded that he have sex with her. And when she grabbed him by the cloak, he left his cloak and he ran. He modeled for us that when our geography is causing us to sin, we need to change our position. We need to get up and move. We need to get out of there, get out of Dodge. And so the same thing is said in 1 Corinthians 6. It says, flee immorality. It says the same thing in 2 Timothy 2, 20 through 24. Flee immorality. Flee fornication. Flee it. Run it. So this is a principle. You have to get your track shoes on. Another principle is fasting. Basically, sins of the sexual sins or sins against the flesh. One of the best ways to defeat it is to use the willpower to deny your flesh its basic needs. Jesus said Jesus fasted 40 days and 40 nights before he went face-to-face, mano a mano with Satan. And he was able to counter every temptation of the evil one. But the preparation before that was the fasting. And then later on, after coming down from the Mount of Transfiguration, you know, the disciples were confronted with a demon they couldn't cast out. And afterwards, they were asking Jesus, saying, we did everything you told us to. And Jesus says, this kind. Notice the opportune time. Jesus wasn't there. Went after the untrained, yet trained, not fully trained disciples, and Jesus had to use this as a lesson. This kind of demonic force only comes out with prayer and fasting. I would encourage you, if you have issues in this life, if you have sin areas that you want to overcome, practice fasting. It's a muscle. Start by missing a meal. Then start by missing 2 meals. and then go a day, then go a day and a night. That's what breakfast is. You're breaking fast. And then go 3 days, then maybe go a week. You know, obviously, if you have medical conditions, check with your doctor. If you're taking medicine, make sure there's not going to be negative implications. But learn how to do the spiritual discipline of fasting. You can break the power of the flesh through fasting, and the spiritual power that comes from within that God can give and impart through fasting. And then get a buddy. Got to get a buddy. You know, James 5:16 says, confess your sins to one another. Confess to one another. You know, I've got buddies that I confess my sins to, and they love me. They also will slap me around. They'll yell at me. They'll let me see the implications of what I'm doing, but they love me, and they're safe people. They're not going to blab to somebody what I'm doing. And so pray for a buddy. Ecclesiastes 4:9 and 10 says, two are better than one. They have good return for their labor. For if one falls, the other can pick him up. But woe be to the one who falls, there's not someone to lift him up. If you don't have a buddy that you can confide in and can share your deepest, darkest sexual sins, then pray and ask God for such a person. Fast and ask God for such a person. Get a buddy. See, 2 Timothy 2, 3 times that I already quoted, it says, aim at righteousness, faith, love, and peace, along with those who call upon the Lord from a pure heart. We can't do this alone. You need a buddy. USS Indianapolis is a story of that. Operating alone in the South China Sea, it had delivered the atom bombs to Tinian Island, and it was on its way back to Hawaii for a further assignment. A Japanese submarine surfaced, hadn't sunk a ship in the whole war. We're right in range of the Indianapolis, fired a spread of 6 torpedoes, hitting the Indianapolis. Within 5 minutes, the Indianapolis sank. Before it sunk, it got 3 SOS signals out, save our ship. 1,200 men were on that ship. 900 men got off the ship. 300 men went down with the ship. If you ever watch Discovery Channel Shark Week, they always have a show on the Indianapolis. If you saw the movie Jaws, there's a long monologue by Robert Shaw about sharks. Because on day one, when the ship sinks like that, it's going like 20 knots, 20 miles or 25 miles an hour. Not everybody gets off simultaneously. Some guys are blown overboard, the ship's still going. And then other guys get off, and other guys get off, and they had inadequate life jackets, inadequate lifeboats, and now the swells are 2 feet. And if you're this high off the water, a 2-foot swell, you can't see very far, and it's at night. And so people were spread out over miles by the time the ship sank. And so then some guys couldn't swim. They died pretty quickly. Some guys were injured. Some guys had inhaled, fuel. They had all kinds of bad stuff going. And then some guys started, swimming, getting groups of guys around them. And then day 2 came, and they would encourage each other, look, we're an important U.S. warship. We're missing. They're going to send out search planes. And no one was looking. No one came. The only things who came were sharks about day 2. And they come in for the morning feeding, they come in for the late feedings. And the guys who had buddies, they actually started, I read survivor accounts. They would lock arms together, and they would put someone wounded in the middle. And then when the sharks would come in, they could see him coming, and they would grab their buddy's arms and use the strength to kick the sharks, to try to kick him away. And when the shark got kicked on the nose, they would kind of turn away. This is not as easy as they thought. And so the ones who survived, almost every guy who survived had at least a buddy with them. You see, we need buddies. And we have a whole church community where people are just being consumed by the sharks of pornography, and they don't have buddies. We need buddies, to bring this problem out in the light. So when you fall, purity is possible. This is the issue. Purity is possible. If you fall, when you fall, then get up. It's interesting. Proverbs 24:16 says, a righteous man falls 7 times and gets up. So just get up. Get up. I don't care what you've done in the past. Get up. You're alive today. God's not done with you, so get up. Start anew, start fresh, pick up some verses to memorize, different things, and start growing. 2 Corinthians 3:18 says, you and I, as we look at Jesus, we're being transformed from one degree of glory to another. Now, on a ship, you have 360 degrees in a circle, right? And so if I'm going 0, 0, 0 this way, and now I change my heading to 0, 0, 1, that doesn't look like very much, does it? I just moved 1 degree. I probably moved 2 degrees, but it's almost imperceptible. But that's the nature of it. We're being transformed 1 degree of glory to another. So change a degree. Just another degree. You're moving toward Christ. You're moving toward holiness. This is sanctification. This is purifying yourself. This is becoming armed. This is getting more verses, more weapons, being transformed one degree of glory to another. And it's a process. This is the last wartime picture of the USS California. It's kind of neat, being appropriate, being in California here. This is an actual taken from the Japanese Naval War College. And they had mock-ups of Pearl Harbor, and every graduate student from the Japanese Naval War College in the 30s had to write an entire operations plan on how they would successfully attack and defeat the American fleet at Pearl Harbor. That was a requirement for graduation. And you see here, those are real people, and that's the life size, or models of the battleship Roe at Pearl Harbor. And you can see, what happened. This is an actual wartime picture. This is the California that's already been hit and starting to sink and slowly sink. It's slowly loading. They had a big bomb hit in the side. And it took 3 days for it to fill with water, and it gradually sank. Okay? So now let me ask you a question. This is not a trick question. You're the Japanese, and you're planning a second attack on Pearl Harbor. How many bombs or how much effort would you spend in sinking or attacking the USS California? Yeah, it's out of the game. It's on the bottom. It has no weapons to hurt you. It's sunk. It's won. It's out, right? Smart American engineers said, it is sunk, but it's not that sunk. We know where it is. And it's only 35 feet of water, maybe 40 feet of water. And so maybe if we go down and put cofferdams, that's what they do, they put a big steel plate on the outside, and then the laws of buoyancy, you put pumps down there and start pumping the water out, then the laws of buoyancy will work and we can refloat the ship. And so it had been sunk for 6 months, and that's what they did. They went down, they raised the California. This is the California. You see these little black spots right here? These are actual sailors in the water that had been blown overboard from other ships or whatnot. And this is what the Arizona looks like from the air. This is what the California would look like. And so they raised it. 6 months later, they raised the California. And this bomb blast is about 70 feet long and about 40 feet tall. So you're not talking a little small little hole. You're talking a massive big hole from a bomb. But it's now above the water. It took a year to fix it up enough for it to steam back to California to get fully refitted. And then, a year and a half later, it steams back out of California and joined the war effort. This is my favorite picture of all of World War II. Every one of these battleships had been sunk or damaged at at Pearl Harbor, and now they were all back kicking butt in the war effort. In fact, the USS California got 7 presidential battle stars before the war ended. And it had been sunk. What's this got to do with purity? You could be listing on fire, have committed horrendous sexual sins, but you're alive. You may need to get cleaned up. You get the fires put out, get the holes plugged, but get back in the game, get back in the battle. Get up, don't quit, don't stop. God's not done with you. So pick it up and go. All these different principles we talked about, get a buddy, start memorizing the Word, read books on spiritual warfare, get the promises, get the hope. All these things are in play because God's not done with you. And so you get a bigger passion. You don't win by just